Thank you all for being with us here this morning. It has been over 2 years since we held a COVID-19 briefing in this space. All of our briefings were virtual prior to now and when we started 2 years ago, and needless to say, a tremendous amount has happened between now and then. And we have learned and continue learning how to live our lives with the virus in our community, thanks to vaccines and compassion from our neighbors who'll take a test and stay remote if they're ill and mask up. And today our community's kids are getting instructions in classrooms and have been for most of the last year. Businesses have been fully open for quite some time, and more people are returning to our downtown offices each week. Tourism and bourbonism, those industries are rebounding, and you see people on the streets. Conventions are coming back. People are going to ball games. And spring, it's a particularly beautiful time in our city. Today's an awesome day. And I, for one, look forward to taking advantage of our declining COVID-19 indicators and getting out to more of these events where we come together as a community. And so many people miss seeing each other, and you really realize it when you see somebody. It's like, boy, it seems like it's been a long time since I've seen you. Well, and the reason, David, is because it has been a long time since you've seen somebody face to face. So no question, our lives have been altered these last 2 years because of the dastardly virus. So good days are indeed ahead, but we simply cannot move forward and forget as well. And I don't want to talk about this virus like it's over either, because we know it could come back. But we can't forget, because the loved ones of over 2,100 people in our community are still mourning the loss of life and that came because of COVID-19, 2,100. And sometimes we sadly hear people use the word only when they critique the public health actions our city, state, and nation have taken over the last 2 years, like only a small percentage of people will get seriously ill. Only a small percentage of people will actually die. And there is no only a percentage when you're a husband or a wife or a daughter or you're the mayor of the city. And my duty is to take steps not just to keep residents safe, but also to help keep their human potential flourishing. And I'm going to do that until certainly my last day in office and beyond that as well. And I know Dr. Moyer will also. And there is no only a percentage when it's your mother or father or brother or sister or child who's hospitalized with a deadly novel virus that we still can't fully understand. I certainly didn't feel that way when my wife was one of the first people to get the COVID in March of 21. And for 13 days, I questioned whether or not she was going to make it or not. I did not feel like, well, she's just a small percentage. That was a very, very terrifying time for me. And there's no only a percentage when you're mourning the loss of someone dear to you, someone who should still be with you and is not. 2,100 people in our city, 2,100 Louisvillians, your neighbors and your family. People like Aretha Tilford, the beloved attendance clerk at Lincoln Elementary, just a few blocks to our east. You can see her beautiful face. The school family planted a tree in her honor, and that you might pass that each and every day if you go down Main Street. And then there's Ty Scroggins, the trailblazing football coach. He lit up a room with his smile and his fiercely competitive spirit. He dedicated his professional life to helping young men excel on and off the field. And that's an extraordinary mentor and the leader that's now absent from our community because of COVID. And the losses continue. Just last week, the regional radio legend and great humanitarian, Wayne Perky, passed away from the virus. And sadly, many of those who we've lost were seniors who still had more life and wisdom to share with our community. Each person, all 2,100, is a light that went out way too soon. So as we look ahead to spring and summer and our hopes for a continued downward trend for the virus, we must also remember its terrible toll. Out of respect for those we've lost and their families, And so we never forget the hard lessons learned from the pandemic. We've got to remember. And that's why I'm proclaiming March 18th as a day of remembrance for our community, for those that we've lost to COVID. March 18th, you might ask, why March 18th? That was the date we recorded our first COVID-19 death here in Jefferson County. Now, as part of this, Metro Hall and City Hall will again be lighted in green, the color of compassion. We're going to light the Big Four Bridge in green also, and we ask everyone in our community to light their front porches in green as we did in 2020. And also I'd like to ask everybody just to wear something green on Friday so we can commemorate those that we've lost and remember those and stay dedicated to good deeds ahead. So light up green, wear something green on Friday too, if you would please. Then we also ask everyone in our city to observe a moment of silence at noon this Friday to remember what we've been through. So let's honor those that we've lost. Let's show solidarity with their families. Let's always remember to add to our city's reserve of resiliency for the inevitable challenges that will come and that have come with COVID-19 or anything else that we may need to confront. And let's remember so we never forgot how we reached a day of declining numbers that we're at now. We must also recognize that on top of the individual and family trauma, there is a collective trauma that we've gone through as a city and a state and a nation, as a country. This is something that most folks have not experienced, this global pandemic. It's disrupted so much of our lives. It's led to mental health challenges that are totally normal in times of stress like this. Put on top of that a war in Ukraine. Put on top of that the racial justice protests that we went through, gun violence that's increasing in cities all over America. It is a lot for people to process, and it's very important that we do process that. So in the coming months, we'll be figuring out other ways for the community to come together to process this collective trauma so people understand that they're not in it by themselves. And just that basic understanding does help people get through it also. So we'll be reaching out to the community to receive their ideas on how we can process collective trauma and grief and understand that mental health challenges are totally normal. What's not normal is not to address it or do anything about that. So we'll need the community's help in figuring out the best way to move forward from here. Now, in the meantime, we have vaccines that are highly effective at preventing serious illness. So we still have people getting their first shots. So it's never too late to start getting vaccinated. And please be sure, if you've been vaccinated, stay up to date with your boosters. We've got an abundance of tests and places to get tests now and treatments that work with more availability on the way. So that obstacle's no longer in place. Got plenty of tests, plenty of vaccines, and plenty of access. And we've also learned, as I mentioned earlier, that we've got to stay humble to this virus because it has pivoted on us way too many times. So please practice standard public health precautions that everybody's familiar with now. We're going to continue to keep tabs on the latest developments, share information as needed, and make sure vaccines are widely available. I want to thank again everybody who has helped lead our city through this pandemic and will continue to do so. Our public health team, our healthcare providers, our amazing vaccine task force. They not only saved lives, but their work has also helped Louisville avoid the inequitable loss of life that other communities have suffered. This is something I'm really proud of and grateful for our city and our public health department. Most places around the country saw an inequitable loss of life and infections for communities of color. In Louisville, that was not the case. I attribute that to our Center for Health Equity, our focus from the Vaccine Task Force on equity, and just the community's compassion to understand how critical this was. So this was a great achievement through this very difficult time. Dr. Sarah Moyer and her team obviously have been a big part of that. So Dr. Moyer, again, thank you. We've been through a lot these past couple years. As I've said to Dr. Moyer, look, if we can get through something like this, we can get through anything. and it's shown us what kind of challenges that we can take on as a city, and our public health department certainly did that. So let's now hear from Dr. Sarah Moyer. Doc?
All right, well, thanks, Mayor, and hello, everyone. Getting a little nervous just remembering the last time I was on this stage speaking in person. I think it was 2 years ago. We were singing Happy Birthday to remember how long we needed to wash our hands, and the WHO had just declared COVID a global pandemic. And the organizers of the St. Patty's Day Parade were up here announcing they were canceling the parade that year. Well, 2 years later, we are back here, vaccinated and boosted, and wearing green again, because there are a lot of reasons to wear green this week. Parade was back on, and for the first time in 2 years, Louisville is in the green with our COVID data. So excited. So new cases this week, we had 1,055 new cases reported, with an incident rate of 19.6 per day or 147.85 per week. For the last 2 years, we were tracking the numbers per day, that 19 number, but the CDC uses per 7 days, and so that's why both are on our dashboard now, and we'll eventually switch to just that CDC number. This is the lowest since the last week in October and early July, so a lot to be happy about there. Hospitalizations, sorry, it's going to skip you down there for a moment. As of yesterday, we had 70 people in the hospital, 12 in the ICU, and 7 on vents. Using the CDC new data tracking points, we had about 9 new COVID admits per 100,000 people in the last 7 days. 10 is that magic number to keep us in the green, so just barely made that cutoff, and hopefully that continues to trend down. 5% of staffed beds are currently occupied with COVID patients. So the number one thing to keep our hospitalization numbers low and in the green is to get boosted. In positive news, 1.2 thousand people got boosted last week. That was more people boosted than reported as COVID cases. So excited about that. But sadly, only 44.9% of our community is currently boosted, so we've got a little bit of work to do. As of last week, no signs of BA.2, that's the other Omicron variant that is suspected to be causing COVID increase across Europe and Asia. But once it gets here, it could possibly hit us hard, and so just encouraging everyone who's not boosted yet, now is the time to do it so you have the immunity when that does come. We have 65% fully vaccinated, and 75.2% of our community has received its first dose. So I'm going to go back up to the top with the deaths. So Jefferson County now in the green, which is the low COVID-19 community level category. So even though this is a good sign, unfortunately, COVID is still spreading in their community and sadly is still taking lives. So finally, my least favorite statistic to report is deaths. Reminder that deaths happen about 3 to 4 weeks after COVID infections, and it takes a few weeks for cases to be reported and fully reviewed to make it up on the dashboard. So many of the deaths reported last week were from the peak in the Omicron surge, and you can see that looking down where we graph the deaths by the date of death, and so earlier last month. But it's also a good reminder that there are still people at high risk for becoming severely ill from the virus if exposed, especially our senior community and those that are immune compromised. So we still need to do the work to protect everyone in every community level category, whether it's green, yellow, or red. The first recommendation is to be up to date on vaccinations. It's never too late to get vaccinated or boosted. Testing is also still important. If you're high risk or someone you are around is high risk, it's important to take extra precautions like getting tested before you visit them and wearing a mask when around those people. So with that, just want to say thank you. It's been a really long 2 years, but really proud of what we could do as a community when we came together and brought resources to the table. While my team and I won't be on stage weekly going forward, we'll still be behind the scenes working on our mission of achieving health equity and improving the health and well-being of all Louisville residents and visitors.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. I'm glad you recognized Connie. I was going to do the same thing. And then Dr. Sarah Beth Hartledge, who's not with us here today, three powerful women here leading our effort with COVID. So we really, again, appreciate all of them. We're now going to hear from Martha Greenwald, who's founder of Who We Lost Kentucky, a platform where people can remember their loved ones that were taken by the virus. And I encourage everybody, from older students to seniors, to go to their website and read their stories. It's not easy, but the Kentuckians we've lost to the virus obviously deserve to be honored. So, Martha?
I'd like to thank the mayor and Dr. Moyer for letting me speak about this. Our site is about stories, so I'm going to start with a story. So I was leaving the supermarket last Friday as the snow began to fall, and people were looking out the windows and seeming a bit stunned. The weather had been predicted, but not expected. A woman stopped beside me and leaned on her cart where a big pink Easter bunny sat atop her grocery bags. "I'm dreading spring," she said to me, "so I actually like this snow." I nodded sympathetically beneath my mask. Because my husband died in May 2020, 2 days after Derby, but no one wants to hear about that. I don't know why she sensed that I was the right person to talk to, but I'm glad she did. "I understand," I said, as we both headed to our cars. Predicted, but not expected. I think this could have been the mission statement of COVID deaths. We all hoped and prayed things would not turn out as they have, but they did, and we have had to find ways to adapt and go on, though sometimes we may not know how. And this is how the Who We Lost project got started, from a place of uncertainty. I'm often asked why I created this project. There are many parts to the answer. I'm a writer, and I've experienced many unexpected losses in my own life. But here's a more local answer. I was inspired by the empathetic response in the state, especially in Louisville, and I wanted to contribute. From years of teaching, I know how therapeutic writing can be, and I saw I could help our neighbors, like the woman grieving for her husband in a supermarket. While some feel it's back to normal and wonder why a project like this is even needed, I can tell you from all the people I speak to that for many, normal no longer exists. So now, a year after we launched Who We Lost, it's evolved into a national endeavor also that's dedicated to the idea that we must remember who we've lost to the pandemic. Let me tell you about our project. We have two websites, Who We Lost Kentucky and whowelost.org. That's the homepage image for the national that you're seeing. We're different than other online remembrances because we are not social media. When you send us the story of your loved one, it's reviewed, then posted in a way that ensures dignity and respect for mourners as well as the mourned. There's no comments, no trolls, no questions, no judgment, and no politics. I'm going to repeat that, no politics. Kentucky, like the rest of America, is experiencing a grief crisis due to the politicization of the virus. You may think you haven't been affected by a COVID death, but it's likely someone you know has. And for those who've been verbally assaulted by both pro and anti-vaxxers and virus deniers, or for those who attend secret grief groups that meet in hidden locations, and yes, those things are true, the losses are felt even more profoundly. When someone dies from cancer or an accident, no one questions the death. We say, we're sorry, but too often, when COVID deaths are brought up, the mourner may hear an insensitive litany of like, oh, well, they were old anyway, or they had heart problems, or they were diabetic, and on and on. Unnecessary shame becomes attached to the tragedy, and this complicates the mourning and adds to the pain. About our site, we believe that sharing a story empowers those who are grieving and that anyone can do it. If you need help, we have a writing toolbox with simple, clear tips for how to get started. That's our submission form you're looking at. If you want extra help, we can use the contact form and we will provide assistance. I've personally helped a lot of people write their stories. We want you to tell whatever story you need to, whatever that means for you. We encourage stories about lost friends and colleagues as well as family members. Here's a few varied excerpts. First, by Jennifer Johnson, who's John Prine's cousin. I don't believe anyone could choose his favorite song. Everything he wrote was a labor of love. The final gift he gave us was, I remember everything. which turned out to be his most prophetic. His music inspired millions of fans worldwide and leaves his family with a lasting legacy. So many people know who John Prine was, but we also need to have important stories told about those who aren't famous, but we need to remember them. A recent addition to our site is a long piece called "We Lost Many, Too Many," written by Suzanne Howe, an activity coordinator at a Louisville long-term care community. In it, she writes of the loss of her family of the heart, those residents lost to COVID whose smiling faces she cherished. She writes of G, who loved her family, bingo, music, a good piece of fried fish, and grilled cheese sandwiches. She writes of V, who was direct and honest and had endured illness and loss with grace and dignity. She loved Aretha Franklin, Nat King Cole, and her 4-generation family. And I'll never forget reading about R chair dancing in her wheelchair as she watched a local fiddler and banjo player perform. I urge you to read the full story on our site. So I want to encourage everyone in Louisville to help us remember our lost loved ones. Tell us about their famous derby hat. Tell us their favorite joke or that story they repeated at every family gathering. What happened on that trip to Mammoth Cave when Dad said, if you and your brother don't stop fighting in the back seat, he'd pull the car over? When Mom came home from work at GE and she put on her slippers, what would she say? All of these details matter, like snow on a weird March afternoon. So come visit the site and write as often as you wish. The Who We Lost Project wants you to. There's so much disagreement on too many things, but we can all agree that there are stories about every single person who died of COVID in this city. And all these stories should be told. So Louisville, let's remember together on March 18th, which I'm really happy Mayor Fisher has proclaimed COVID Memorial Day, but let's remember them every day too. Thank you.
Okay, and now we're going to hear from Dr. Amy Shaw. Dr. Shaw is a senior adult psychiatrist at 7 counties who will speak about the grief we faced with so much loss in our community and around the world. Thank you, Dr. Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor and Martha, for allowing me to speak. Our situation for the last few years has included grief, denial, disbelief, confusion, shock, and anger. Many of us have lost loved ones from COVID-19. The difficulty of mourning our losses during the COVID-19 pandemic is complicated and full of contradictions. Not only do our losses include the deaths of our friends and relatives, but also the personal losses of being isolated and not being able to connect. We miss feeling human touch and much-needed hugs. We miss being able to celebrate holidays, birthdays, and special moments. We may feel alone and stranded and like no one else can understand our grief. We may feel like we're expected to get back to normal too fast. Or it may be that nothing in our lives has changed or stopped, but instead we feel like everything important is gone. This is how grief impacts someone mentally, physically, financially, socially, and spiritually. More than 2,000 people have died from COVID just in Jefferson County alone. How do we truly process the amount of loss we suffered as a community? We do it by remembering our missing loved ones as we go through the stages of grief. We may not be prepared for the emotional ups and downs. We really need to feel these feelings. It's healthy and appropriate to mourn in your own way. We need to take time to process our losses, to protect our mental health while seeing ourselves and our families as priorities. Let's take a shift to realize what's important. We didn't plan for this catastrophe. It took us unaware. But we will never stop missing our loved ones. They would not want us to give up. The physical symptoms of grief can range from crying, poor appetite, sleep problems, as well as shortness of breath and fatigue. Someone may have physical symptoms from panic attacks, like a racing heartbeat, feelings of being too hot, or feelings of impending doom. Others may feel trapped. Having obsessive thoughts about a deceased loved one is a normal reaction to death. We should not overlook these symptoms as they're signs our bodies are in distress. but we can lessen them by taking care of ourselves and eating right and getting enough rest. The financial impact of COVID on some families has been profound. Many families are facing a reduced income, not just the loss of a loved one. Maybe one partner was responsible for managing the household expenses, and they aren't here anymore. People we depended on and people that cared about us are gone. How do we cope? As a psychiatrist in this Louisville community, I've seen people hopeless and weary. It's true. But I've also seen people more determined than ever to live, to accomplish their goals, to stop using drugs and alcohol, to rebuild their families who have been torn apart, and to gain economic stability in their future. I've seen some positive stories of women who've wanted to stop using drugs, who've entered a treatment program and who was able to bring their family and their children back together. I've seen people achieve their goal of having their own housing after being homeless for years. And I've seen people recently get jobs and say how grateful they are to be able to work again. If you're suffering with your grief, you're not alone. Coping with death is important to your mental health. We should seek our supportive, caring friends and express our feelings. We should take care of our health and be patient with our feelings. Seeking help from a healthcare professional is important if needed. Call the crisis line at 502-589-4313 if things are worsening. Again, that number is 502-589-4313. It's a sign of strength to accept help. During this pandemic, like most of us, I have felt severe isolation and difficulty distinguishing one day from the next. There appeared to be no change on the horizon, even though everything seemed to be moving so fast. So I understand how it's possible to feel disconnected spiritually. But we can help ourselves by searching for a new purpose in life, or strengthening our spiritual beliefs, perhaps in a new way. It's normal and totally okay for our lives to change in this way. During my work as a psychiatrist, I often hear sad things, but I do hear the hopeful dreams of people who want to build a better future for themselves and their families. The answer is not to forget the lives lost during this tragedy. I think our loved ones who died of COVID would never want us to give up. Instead, they would want us to build a future for this city, one that is founded in the past, but one that also moves forward with the strength of their memory behind it.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. This past weekend, I had a really extraordinary opportunity for folks that might be thinking, well, this is just happening in Louisville. There was a group of about 12 mayors that were pulled together by Dr. Vivek Murthy. He's the U.S. Surgeon General. And Dr. Murthy has identified this as an issue for our country and is very concerned about how we as a nation move through the individual and collective trauma that's occurred to us because of the pandemic and then all the other issues on top of it. And he's determined to figure out ways to help us as a country to move forward. I mean, not to a new normal, but a different future. And that we're just not going to, buck it up, get strong, forget about the past. That's not the best way to approach that. So I feel confident we'll be hearing from the Surgeon General on activities associated with this as well. So I'm grateful for that and was grateful for that experience and certainly grateful for these wonderful women on stage with us here today and to each and every one of you all that have helped us get through the pandemic and have been. It's been tough on the media as well to report on this each and every day and not just the confusion of the numbers, this, that, and the other thing, but the deaths associated with that and the sadness. So I want to thank the media for all of the work that you all have done throughout this time and will continue to do as well. And so to our media friends, if you could, please be sure to get the word out about the Day of Remembrance so on this Friday, the 18th, and we want the loved ones of those we've lost to COVID-19 to know that their community will always have their backs.